Hello, welcome to the NPTEL course Introduction to Language and Linguistics, and this is the first lecture for the course. So, the name of the first lecture is How do we define language? So, we will be talking about the idea of language from different perspectives. We will talk about new definitions of language and also ask this basic question, what does it mean to know a language? So, before we start and move into the discussion, I will ask you a very basic question, and you should ask this question to yourself. What is your motivation for joining this course? I am sure that you have different backgrounds, those who are interested in this course, and you have different motivations for joining this course. So, I have listed a number of ideas which may act as your motivatory factor. So, you may get some interest in origin or evolution of language questions. Maybe the strange symbols on dictionary helped you to think and know more on the discipline called linguistics. Maybe you have observed the language development of any child around you and you thought that it will be a good idea to know about the development of language. Maybe you have observed similarities and differences between any languages around you, or if you are an engineer, you thought about Turing machine and the meaning of code related to language. Now, there are some more specific questions which can be a part of your motivation. You can have these questions in your mind as well. Why do immigrants struggle with a new language when their children learn the language very easily and also ridicule them for errors? Why can't computers talk to us? So, you may say that no, computers do talk to us, we talk to Siri, we talk to Cortana, but there are certain limitations, right? So, you can have this question in your mind, why can't computers talk to us like any human beings? You can also have this question, did scientists find the first language spoken on earth? Or if you are interested in genetics or biological science, you may ask this question, is there something called the language gene? Another related question, do chimps use sign language? So, all these questions can be your motivatory factor for joining a basic course on linguistics. So, when I was talking about these probable questions for your motivation, I am sure you noticed that these questions are actually asked from different perspectives, right. So, I have divided 3 different perspectives of these questions which are related to your quest for the discipline. The first one is the AI perspective, which is of course related to codes, why and how languages are complex codes. The second question is related to philosophy or psychology perspective, how human language is associated with human mind. If you are coming from, for example, a background of cognitive science or philosophy, psychology, you may have this question in your mind. And the third question is coming from social science perspective, are there differences in language based on social stratification? Do social groups use different languages? So, these questions are for yourself, and I already told you that I am assuming that you are coming from different backgrounds. So, when we are trying to define language, that is the task for today's class, right. So, and we are asking this question, do we define language from different perspectives? The answer is yes. We can ask this question or we can define language from multiple perspectives, and let us talk about it. Before we move to the actual definitions, I will tell you that we have to unlearn a few common notions which are related to misconceptions about language and linguistics. What are these misconceptions? First, you have to know that linguistics is not something related to traditional grammar or school grammar. So, we do talk about traditional grammar, but the discipline does not focus traditional grammar or school grammar. What is the difference? In prescriptive grammar or school grammar, we talk about certain rules which talk about how language should be, but we do not talk about them. We talk about the general description of language and analysis of language. We will come to this part. And we do not primarily talk about written language. We do talk about written language, but our primary focus is spoken language. This is something that you have to keep in mind. And we do not focus on what we should know, rather what we already know. So, this discipline of linguistics is not telling you about what to learn about and what you should know. Instead, it tries to understand the knowledge of language that is already there inside us. So, I am sure you understood that you have to unlearn certain concepts, and why I am talking about unlearning of these concepts. Now, I have listed some definitions of language from different perspectives. There are different definitions of language given by different people at different points of time, but I have chosen 3 definitions here and I will tell you why. The first definition was given by Sapir, who was an anthropologist. So, this definition was given in the year 1921. Language is a purely human and non-instinctive method of communicating ideas, emotions and desires by means of voluntarily produced symbols. You can see that I have highlighted some expressions, and I want you to think about these terms. That is why I have highlighted them. Language is purely human. So, in linguistics we are not talking about communications or communication system of other animals. We are talking about humans only. And non-instinctive, did you think about this idea of instinct related to language? If not, now is the time for you to think about it. And also symbols. Maybe you have thought about this concept of symbol, because it is very much related to language. The next definition was given by Bloch and Traeger in the year 1942, and it says a language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols by means of which a social group cooperates. The first highlighted term is arbitrary, which means random. So, why we are saying random, why we are associating the term arbitrary for vocal symbols, you will be knowing about them in some other lecture when you will know more on the basic features of human language. And when we are highlighting social group, it is of course a social science perspective that I have just mentioned. We have to keep in mind that we are talking about the idea of social group while defining language from some particular perspective. The third definition is a comparatively newer definitions, which was given by a cognitive scientist named Steven Pinker in the year 2007. So, this is basically a newer edition of 1995 book. Language is an evolutionary adaptation of humans. It is a psychological faculty, a mental organ, a natural system of computational module. A number of new ideas, right? Evolutionary adaptation. So, if you are coming from a biological science background, or if you are interested in the biological perspectives of language, then you can understand what I am trying to say, how humans adapted language as a part of evolution, and how we are associating the concept of language with the idea of psychological faculty. So, we are saying that language is a mental organ. Why are we saying that language is a mental organ? We will be talking about this in detail in the next lecture. And the last part of the definition is saying that it is a natural system of computational module. Natural system, you can understand this part, but why computational module? So, if you are interested in the coding part, you can understand it partially, and if you are not thinking about the AI perspective, maybe this is a time for you to think about it in a different way. So, language is also viewed as a computational module. So, we are actually viewing this idea from a completely different perspective. Also, two more points that I have listed on the slide, we need to know about them. Human language is different from animal communication, that I have briefly mentioned, and also we can define language or talk about language from a perspective of one's identity, both local and national. So, we do have different definitions of language which are coming from different perspectives, but you can also think about this particular question: since when do humans start talking about language? So, is it the case that humans started talking about the language since their existence? We do not know, but what we know is almost 3000 years ago in ancient India, people raised questions on language. So, Panini, a very well known grammarian from 5th century BC in India, talked about the idea that different parts of words are glued together. So, it was a very important idea in the history of thought, and we need to focus on this. Ancient Greece also started talking about grammar and description of grammar in particular. So, it started in ancient Greece, and people in Rome followed this tradition while they talked about and analyzed Latin grammar. Then you should know the name of the person called Ferdinand de Saussure, who started talking about social perspective of language. So, this is a very important piece of work which viewed language from a completely different perspective, and we will be talking about a few notions given by Saussure in the future lectures. These are the key terms given by Saussure. In 1957, a very different approach and a new approach of language was born with Noam Chomsky. So, why we are saying that it is a very new definition? In 1957, Chomsky talked about this new definition in his work Syntactic Structures, and let me go through this definition quickly. From now on, I will consider a language to be a set of sentences, finite or infinite, each finite in length and constructed out of a finite set of elements. So, this is very, very important, because the idea of language is perceived from a very different perspective, and we will be talking about this idea in detail. So, if you scan Chomsky's view of language, you can find that there are some very important ideas shared by him, which we consider as extremely important in the discipline, and that is why Chomsky is our great guru. Language has some structural properties. These are complex. Language is also abstract. They have a specific purpose, and they are acquired by children. When I am using the term acquired, please make a note that I am not saying learnt by children. So, there is a basic difference between learning and acquisition. You can learn swimming, but you acquire language. So, we will come back to this view in detail in the next lecture. So, are you familiar with this picture? For some of you, I am sure that you know about this. This is Tower of Babel, which is a myth from Babylon regarding how people speak different languages. So, it is believed that earlier the people from the world spoke the same language, but they were building a tower to reach God. So, God gave them different languages so that a breakdown in communication can take place and they can't talk to each other to build the tower. So, this is a myth, and this is very important for us, because this myth talks about the idea of different languages. We are coming back to a longer quote by Chomsky, which was given in 1975. Let us try to read this together. It is curious fact about the intellectual history of the past few centuries that the physical and mental development have been approached in quite different ways. it is taken for granted that physical structure of the organism is genetically determined. But human cognitive systems, when seriously investigated, prove to be no less marvelous and intricate than the physical structures that develop in the life of the organism. Why then should we not study the acquisition of a cognitive structure such as language more or less as we study some complex bodily organ? So, the purpose of reading out this long excerpt from Chomsky's work is basically to give you this idea that we are trying to bring these ideas from biological science and bridge a gap between biological and cognitive science, and we are trying to see that we are trying to investigate the ideas of certain bodily organs. Similarly, there is a scope to study the acquisition of cognitive structure. Like language is a part of this cognitive system, if you are familiar with the term cognitive system. So, now the question is, do we take the language questions for granted? You can think about the fact that we are talking every day, but we do not think about what we are we do think about what we are saying, but we do not think about how we are saying it and what are the strategies for this saying or talking, right. So, we take a lot of things for granted related to language, and here I am highlighting this point that ability to speak and understand human language is complex. This is not a very simple idea, rather this is quite complex. We speak and we also understand someone who is using human language, but the processes involved with this speaking and understanding is quite complex. At this point we can ask these questions: what do we know and how do we know so much, which is known as the Plato's problem. We will come back to this Plato's problem in the next lecture, but for now it is very important for us to know that these questions are major questions and basic questions for our purpose. What do we know and how do we know so much? This is known as Plato's problem, and it is also related to the idea of poverty of stimulus. What is the meaning of the poverty of stimulus? Children are exposed to limited data, but they talk a lot. How does this happen? So, Chomsky has given a number of new ideas, and you should know that Chomsky attacked the behaviorist idea that language learning can be explained by a stimulus response model. So, stimulus response model is all of us read it in school biology, that learning takes place with the help of stimulus response, but Chomsky attacked this idea and said instead that no, it is not done through imitation. Instead, what he said was every person can produce and understand different combinations of word, even if no one has uttered them before. So, you can basically understand very complex combination of words which are permissible in your language, of course. Maybe those combinations have not been used by any member of your speech community previously. This is a completely new construction, but you understand them perfectly and also reply back. How does this happen? And our brain must have some program that can build unlimited sentence out of finite words. So, we have access to limited or finite words, but we can create infinite or unlimited sentence with the help of those finite words. This is very important for us. This is new and important. So, we can refer to this program as mental grammar. So, we are saying that brain must have some program which are building these sentences, unlimited sentences, and the program that is building the sentences can be termed as mental grammar. So, how do children develop language is a question that is coming next to us. We can say that children develop complex grammars automatically. We talk about this idea of acquisition. We will explain this in detail in the next lecture, but for now we should know that children develop complex grammars automatically and no formal training is actually needed for that. So, there must be some reason. We talked about this program and we need to understand this program, the idea of this program in detail, right? That we will be doing. And children can produce and understand sentences that they have never heard. We also talked about this idea and we need to think about it. So, we will wrap up today's lecture with the basic ideas that we have learned today, and let us remind ourselves whatever we have learned. There are different perspectives of the definition of language. So, I will request you to go through the previous slides and pause and read those definitions again. And also we need to remember that a very new kind of definition was given by Noam Chomsky, and we should keep that in mind not only for this class or the next class, but all the classes for this course, because this is very, very basic to our discipline. And the ability to speak and hear human language is complex. We produce and understand combination of words that we have never uttered or heard before. So, let us come to the conclusion. We discussed different perspectives of language in this lecture and different definitions of language from those perspectives. We also talked about the new definition of language given by Chomsky, and I told you that it will be very important for us throughout the course. We learnt about the Plato's problem, why and how do we know so much from so little, and we got this idea of mental grammar, which is a program. So, let us finish today's lecture. These are the key references for today's class, and thank you.